f1.4, creamy, beautiful backgrounds. Won't need that anymore. Ooh, f2.8, eye-wateringly expensive. Won't need that anymore. f2.8 macro lens. Pfft, money I wasted on that. The wait is over and it's here. Luminar AI's much anticipated Bokeh AI tool is here right now. And thanks to a piece of software that's around a mere $100, I can do away with all of those expensive lenses. Right? Hi, I'm Anthony Turnham and I've been taking photos for over 20 years and earning money as a professional photographer for well over a decade. On this channel, it's my goal to share my knowledge with you guys freely. So if you're interested in photo editing and photography in general, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. So what is bokeh? And how do you even say it for that matter? Bokeh is a Japanese word that we've adopted into English, which basically describes the blurry quality of the out of focus area of our photo. According to my research, it's pronounced like this.
The right answer in Japanese is bokeh. Bokeh.
Bokeh.
But let's not get too hung up on that, because even the great Tone struggles to pronounce it.
These are bokeh balls.
Like so many words, we've borrowed it into the English language, and of course we're going to anglicize it. So for example, let's take the French word restaurant that we've adopted. I mean, you don't say, I'm hungry, I'm going to le restaurant. You say restaurant, right? So when we're considering the pronunciation, I recommend maybe we don't get too bokehnal about it. So how do you put your background out of focus? Well, normally you need a lens with a very wide aperture. Whoop. Something like that. As I'm sure you probably know, a wide aperture is denoted by a low f-stop number. A wide aperture is great because it allows us to gather more light and also allows us to throw our background into a nice creamy blur. But to own glass like a 1.4 lens here or an f2.8 lens here is really expensive. So when I found out that Luminar AI was dropping their new Bokeh AI tool, which is going to allow us to control the blur of the background in post-production, I was really excited. If after my demo of this you like the look of this software, you can go ahead and use the link and the discount code in the description below and save yourself some money, and I get a small commission from Skylum as well, which is much appreciated and helps me keep creating this free content for you guys. Having a nice blurry background allows us to focus more of our attention on our subject. So for that reason, when I shoot portraits, I'll usually be using my nice expensive glass. So I thought I didn't have a whole heap of examples for this particular video, but then I thought again, the very nature of the optics of phones means that they struggle to get the background blurry and out of focus. So I've grabbed a couple of photos from my phone and I've loaded them into Luminar. So let's take a look. So this photo of my daughter was shot on my normal camera with an f1.4 lens. So look at that beautiful bokeh in the background. We're all out of focus and our attention goes straight to my daughter, but we know that she's on a beach. So when we're blurring the background, it's all about bringing our attention to our subject, while at the same time leaving enough information in the background so that we get a sense of the environment that they're in. As an example, I just went into the kitchen, ambushed my wife and persuaded her to get in front of my camera, even though she hadn't done her hair, no makeup, just in her hoodie. But here she is, sat there. Thank you very much, Sarah. So this photo was taken at f2.8. And as you can see my wife nice and sharp here. But as we get to the bookcase in the background, you've got no hope of knowing what titles they are, but you can certainly tell that they're books still, but it's nice and out of focus and our attention goes here to our subject. You can see in the camera roll down here that I've got some other versions of the same shot. And if I jump to another one, this one here was shot at f8 and all of a sudden our background becomes much more noticeable and everything's much more identifiable. And if I jump to this one that I shot at f22, you can see that we have the foreground in focus, the middle ground where my wife is in focus, and we have the books, and you can pretty much read every title that's there on the bookshelf. So up until now, if you didn't have a nice expensive lens, say an f2.8 lens, you're not going to be able to do this to the background and send it off into that nice, creamy, blurry, hazy look. Taken recently at a friend's wedding, this would be a really nice family portrait if it wasn't for this really distracting background. This was taken on my phone and pretty much everything behind us is almost pin sharp and really vying for our attention. So let's do it. Let's jump into the Portrait Bokeh AI tool and see what it can do. So we've got the amount slider at the top. If I grab that and I just start easing that up to the right, We can see that by what can only be described as magic, my family and I have been masked out and it's blurred the background. And not only that, but you'll see that the effect is more prominent on the background on that hedge. And as we come towards the foreground here, it just tapers off. That blurring just fades away. And if I bring my mouse onto the photo itself, you will see the mask that was automatically generated by Luminar AI. This is insane. When I think of all the hours that I've spent in Photoshop before masking things out, what Luminar's AI can do is an absolute game changer. This is so cool. Identifying and masking 4 figures full length is no mean feat. But if it hasn't quite nailed the mask, as it hasn't here, just below my daughter's arm here, there's just a little bit that's revealed. So what we can do is actually come in and alter the mask. So I'm going to come into the brush control and choose focus, because obviously everything else is in focus. So we want that to be in focus. So we'll just paint that. And conversely, if we wanted to defocus the little area between my son's head and my wife's shoulder here, we could do that by grabbing the defocus brush, use the left bracket key to reduce the size of that. And I've done a really nasty painting job with my mouse there. Normally I'll be using my Wacom tablet, and I'd thoroughly recommend getting a graphics tablet if you guys are doing photo editing. I'll put a link to the one that I use in the description below as well. That just helps you when you're painting out little areas like this here, you can do it much more accurately. Okay, let's have a look at another one and go a little bit more in depth. Here we have a shot of my daughter and my son, and they're walking along in this forest area here. And although I shot this at f2.8, I'm still not happy with my background. In my opinion, it's still distracting. So what can we do? Well, let's come to the Bokeh AI tool and let's crank the amount all the way to 100. And bada bing, bada bong, just like that. Check this out. Here's our before. Here's our after. That is just insane. If I hover my mouse over, you can see again that it's made pretty much a perfect selection. There's one part that I can just see over my son's hat here where it hasn't got that quite right. So again, what I can do is just tell that I want this area to be in focus and paint that back in. You may have noticed that we have another drop down here that says background, and this just gives us more control over how that background looks. If you want to see the before and after just of this tool, just press the / key on your keyboard and you'll be able to toggle the before and the after. And although I think the amount slider being at 100 is probably a little too aggressive, I'm going to leave that there for now just while we play around with these other settings. So we have the option to brighten or darken down the background. And because the brightest part of a photo pops out to the viewer more and darker areas recede, we can actually leverage this fact to help our subjects just stand out a little bit more. I actually quite liked the effect when everything was brightened up, so maybe I'll just brighten that around 70. So as well as an overall brightening effect, we can also add some glow to the highlights, which is a really cool feature as well. In the same way brightness values can control our perception of how close or how receding an element is in a photo, so the warmth can as well. In a nutshell, cooler or more blue elements recede into the background. So if we wanted to, we could use that knowledge to actually cool down the background and again make it recede and our subjects pop out more. Oh, the depth correction slider is just so cool. So we've got a 2-dimensional photo with a mask that's been created by the AI, and the AI has also calculated from our 2D scene a virtual 3-dimensional space. What do I mean by that? Well, Luminar has effectively calculated what it believes to be the furthest point from our camera and applied more blur there. And then as we get closer, and you can see it best on the floor here, it knows that this area is getting closer to the camera. It just reduces and feathers off that bokeh amount as it approaches the camera. And from a coding point of view, my mind is just blown. I can't even comprehend how they've done that. But anyway, you can grab the depth correction slider if you're not happy with how it looks, and you can bring that blurring effect closer to the camera, or we can push it further back into the distance. Okay, I've made some random changes here. Let's toggle our before to see where we've come from, and our after to see what Luminar AI has created with this new tool. Got to be straight up, guys, I'm really impressed. If you shoot portraits regularly, if you capture your friends, your family, if you photograph weddings, or maybe even you're an Instagrammer, then this tool will be invaluable for you. For sure, you're not going to need to use it every single time, but just having that available to you in your editing arsenal, I think it's going to be really helpful. I think we've seen that this tool is very effective, but the question is, when should you use it in your photos? Well, not every photo needs a blurry background, so my general rule of thumb is this. If you weren't able to get a blurry background during capture, and the background is distracting from the subject, and surrounding background isn't important to telling the story of the photo, then go ahead and use Bokeh AI. So in conclusion, what do I think to Bokeh AI? Well, I'm impressed on two fronts. One, I'm really impressed by the actual results that it's creating. They are way better than I expected them to be. And probably more than that, I'm blown away by the software engineering feat that has actually gone into making this possible. Like, how does the AI know where the people are and be able to make that mask just like that? I've done some programming before and I just can't fathom it. Generally speaking though, the results are pretty good most of the time. Occasionally it does struggle with that masking, and I'm going to cut it some slack on that one because it's doing a lot. And I expect in future releases and future updates, just like with a lot of these tools, when they come out, they might have a few teething problems, and usually that gets ironed out in the subsequent releases. But for now, for an initial launch, I'm really impressed. Going forward, I do see myself using this tool a fair bit. Even though I said that I do shoot a lot of my portrait work wide open or with a very shallow depth of field, so I get nice blurry backgrounds anyway, I feel that even at the widest aperture, some shots can still benefit from making that background go even blurrier still. So as I said earlier, if you guys don't have Luminar AI yet, please use that link below, and also there's that discount code that'll get to save you guys some money at the checkout as well. There's a lot more to this Luminar AI update than I've been able to share in this video, but for sure the Bokeh AI is the fanfare addition to this, so I thought we'd better cover that first. If Luminar is your thing and you don't want to miss any of my future videos, go ahead and click that bell icon. Of course, subscribe if you haven't already, and right now you can see some other videos that YouTube reckons might be of interest to you, so why don't you go ahead and click on one of those, and I will see you in one of those videos. I'll catch you later guys. Cheers for watching.